Every few years, an MLB team is bound to make a stupid trade, whether it's Babe Ruth to the Yankees for $100,000 or Nolan Ryan to the Mets for a guy who in return posted his 2.6 WAR. Today, we'll look at every MLB team's worst trade in recent history. Starting it off with a bang, we have Giancarlo Stanton being traded to the Yankees back in 2018. Back in 2014, he signed a 13-year, $325 million deal with the Marlins, and then he was shipped off to New York, where he would later only average 105 games, not even counting the COVID season, which he only played 20 out of 60 games. He just hasn't performed at the level that the Yankees expected him to when they traded for him.
Yeah, but to be fair, the Yankees really didn't give up anything for him.
Yeah.
And he's still been a stud in the playoffs for the Yankees. And at the time, Giancarlo Stanton was always healthy, played a lot of games on the Marlins, still was mobile, could run. And ever since he joined the Yankees, he's just been absolute garbage with staying on the field.
This year
he hasn't stayed healthy.
This year he posted a negative WAR in 101 games. Mm-hmm. So he's not on this list because the Yankees gave up too much in return for Stanton. It's because of the contract that they received when they traded for Stanton. Next up, the Baltimore Orioles. They traded a lot of talent away. They traded away Evan Phillips, who's now the closer on the Dodgers. They traded a lot of guys who you didn't even know were Orioles, but this one was pretty easy for me. They traded away Manny Machado back in 2018 for basically no one except Dean Kramer, who's now their fourth starter and has a career ERA over 4. It's around 4.3. So they could have gotten way more in return. That's why I have them as the Orioles' worst trade in recent memory.
Yeah, and with the Orioles, at the time, their owner was really cheap, just recently sold the team, so the GM didn't have the flexibility to bring back Machado, who was a free agent the next year, so they just kind of had to get rid of him for some prospects because you knew that he wasn't coming back next year. You see that with a lot of teams now, where they just kind of get rid of their key guy when they're in that rebuild stage and don't really get a ton in return.
Sticking with the AL East, this one was a pretty easy one for the Red Sox, trading away Mookie Betts to the Dodgers for basically an average player in return and Alex Verdugo. They got Alex Verdugo, Connor Wong, and shortstop Jeter Downs, who's now on the Yankees. Verdugo is also on the Yankees now, and he really was an average player with them. He never made an All-Star game, never even got an MVP vote. Connor Wong's their catcher now, but had an OPS below 700, so it was a pretty terrible trade and one of the worst in recent memory.
And at the time, it really didn't make any sense at all. Verdugo was never hyped up to be a Mookie Betts type player. And Jeter Downs was never really hyped up until he got traded for Mookie Betts because everyone expected him to be good. It just didn't really make sense at the time. But like I said, you always see it where kind of in that rebuild stage or knowing that you're not going to go and win a World Series, you kind of just get rid of a guy for hoping that you can get a prospect in return.
Up next, the Blue Jays. This one was a pretty recent trade back in December of 2022. The Diamondbacks traded to the Blue Jays Dalton Varsho, and in return, they sent Lourdes Gurriel and Gabby Moreno to the Diamondbacks. They were both key pieces to the Diamondbacks' playoff and World Series run. Dalton Varsho posted a 674 OPS this year and has a career OPS hovering around 700, so it was a pretty bad trade for the Blue Jays.
And my reaction to this is it's not that bad of a trade for the Blue Jays, honestly, because they needed defense in the outfield where Lourdes Gurriel doesn't really have that. That's where Varsho came in, and they already had Danny Jansen and Alejandro Kirk at catcher, so I don't even think that's that bad of a trade. I think it's kind of balanced for each. Yeah, Varsho wasn't good, but he still has time to develop and become a good player. So for me, my reaction is that's not that bad.
Last AL East team, the Rays, when they traded away their Cy Young winner Blake Snell, who also just won a Cy Young in 2023 with the Padres, the Rays received Blake Hunt, Cole Wilcox, Francisco Mejia, who was a pretty hyped up catching prospect at the time, but now he's a bust, and I don't think he's in the MLB anymore, and Luis Patino, who's projected to be in their starting rotation this year, but he's been in kind of a bust also. He's still young, has still time to develop, but hasn't really pitched a lot because of injuries, and he's just been in the minor leagues for most of his career.
And the Rays probably saw something with Blake Snell's game that they didn't like, probably not going deep into games and walking a ton of hitters, because Rays love to have their starting pitchers go deep into games and have that reliable, don't walk a ton of batters and that are reliable, where Snell's very inconsistent with that. So I can see why the Rays traded him, but they definitely could have gotten more out of it.
Next up, one of the worst trades ever, not even just recent memory. This is just will go down as one of the worst trades ever. James Shields to the White Sox for in return Fernando Tatis Jr. He goes to the Padres. You know, it was just a terrible trade because James Shields would go on to the White Sox that year, pitch 114 innings, and post a 6.77 ERA. That's just unheard of. A 6.77 ERA in 114 innings for Fernando Tatis Jr., who would later finish in MVP conversations in 2021. So, you know, even the steroids and stuff.
It just summarizes up the White Sox organization trading Fernando Tatis Jr. for James Shields, who wasn't even in his prime. He's out of his prime and ending towards the end of his career.
Because his last 3 years were with the White Sox. He retired after being traded.
It made zero sense, and it was just one of the dumbest trades ever.
Yeah, and this next one is also one of the worst trades on this list. JT Realmuto to the Phillies for Sixto Sanchez and Jorge Alfaro. Alfaro wasn't even a hyped up prospect or anything. He was just there for a death piece since they lost JT at catcher. But Sixto Sanchez, it was basically Sixto Sanchez for JT Realmuto, and Sixto has not lived up to any of the hype. He's overweight now. He tops out at like 90 miles an hour. Looking at it now, it's one of the worst trades on this list.
Yeah, looking at it now, it's one of the worst trades. But looking at it back then, at that time, it wasn't bad at all because Sixto Sanchez was supposed to be a stud. He was throwing gas, and the Marlins were also just kind of throwing away their players like Christian Yelich. They lost Marcell Ozuna. They traded him where he signed with a different team.
And Stanton, we talked about that.
Yeah, we already talked about Stanton and JT Realmuto. So at the time, it wasn't a bad trade at all. They got a really good pitcher in return. Now you look at it, and yeah, it's one of the worst trades.
Oakland Athletics trading away Josh Donaldson. This was still mind-boggling to me because I don't understand why they traded him. Back in 2014, it was like the first time he was at his peak. He was his first All-Star. They traded him away for Brett Lowry and Kendall Graveman, Kendall Graveman was good, but he wasn't good until like 2021. So I don't really understand the trade. I don't know. I'll never know why they did this trade.
Brett Lowry wasn't awful in the Athletics either, but he's not Josh Donaldson at all. I don't understand the trade either. Maybe there's something we're missing, like they couldn't compete in those years.
No, it's because the A's are a Moneyball team.
Yeah, that's what it really is. So maybe there's something else that we're missing, but that was a pretty stupid trade.
Coming up next, the Dodgers. They're really not known for making terrible trades, but this one, let me tell you, this one's really bad. They traded Yordan Alvarez away for Josh Fields, but at the time, Josh Fields wasn't really that bad of a pitcher. But looking at it now, it's pretty bad because Yordan Alvarez has many years to come of 30 or more home runs.
Yeah, but at the time, Yordan Alvarez didn't have this expectation of hitting 30 home runs per season. There's some dumb trades at the time, like Mookie Betts for those three, Jeter Downs and Verdugo, were at the time like they're so stupid. And there's other times with Sixto Sanchez and JT Realmuto where it feels balanced.
Yeah.
But then current day, you look at it and see how bad it is. This is one of those where it wasn't awful because at the time the Dodgers needed pitching to get them back to the World Series, and Yordan Alvarez wasn't expected to be how good he was this year.
Our next trade, this one's still talked about a lot and brought up a lot. Zach Gallen and Sandy Alcantara on the Cardinals traded for Marcell Ozuna because they are two Cy Young candidate pitchers. I know Sandy Alcantara had a down year, but he won a Cy Young in 2022. Zach Gallen has finished top 3 in the last 2 years in Cy Young. They traded Marcell Ozuna, a guy who only played 2 years with the Cardinals and never posted an OPS above 810, and it's just still it's insane to me that they traded away Zach Allen and Sandy for Marcell.
And you look at the Cardinals now, their biggest weakness is pitching. So
exactly.
That's exactly what they need. They need Sandy Alcantara and Zach Allen. Imagine where they would be right now with that team, and they probably wouldn't even have to trade for Arenado and Goldschmidt at some point. Or did they sign Goldschmidt? Whatever they did with Goldschmidt, I know they traded for Arenado. They probably won't even have to do that because their pitching would be so good that they would need a little bit of offense just to help to support that pitching.
Next up, this one's still talked about a lot today, too. The Pirates trading away Tyler Glasnow and Austin Meadows for Chris Archer, who absolutely sucked on the Pirates. They traded away Tyler Glasnow, who would later to go on be one of the best pitchers in the MLB.
And they also traded away Garrett Cole, which I think that's probably the worst trade, trading away Garrett Cole, because that's awful. He's been the best, one of the best pitchers.
But I did actually have that one on my list, but then they got Joe Musgrove in return. I looked at what they traded for Joe Musgrove. They got David Bednar and Andy Rodriguez from that trade with Joe Musgrove. Yeah. So I was like, I can't really put that over Chris Archer because they lost Tyler Glasnow and Austin Meadows.
Then I agree with you. This is probably the worst trade then, because you said who they say again?
Andy Rodriguez and
no. Now
now they got Chris Archer.
Chris Archer, right? So Chris Archer was awful in the Pirates. I just remember all I know is that he let up 2 bombs to Derek Dietrich. That's all I remember from Chris Archer's Pirates career. So that is probably the worst trade for them.
Next up, the Tigers, when they traded away Justin Verlander to the Astros for Daz Cameron, Franklin Perez, and Jake Rogers. Jake Rogers is a catcher for the Tigers now, and Daz Cameron hasn't really played for the Tigers in about a year or so. He was a pretty hyped up prospect at the time, but hasn't lived up to the expectations.
Yeah, and we were young and not paying attention to the prospects a lot, but I feel like even at the time, this was one of those trades where like, what the hell was that? Like, kind of like the
one of those lopsided trades. Like
one of those lopsided trades.
The Diamondbacks actually traded away Max Scherzer to be Justin Verlander's teammate later on the Tigers, but in return, the Diamondbacks only received Edwin Jackson, so looking at it now, that's pretty bad.
Yeah, and Max Scherzer was the Diamondbacks' first-round pick, 11th pick in the draft. Doesn't really make any sense. Edwin Jackson was nothing too special at that time.
He played for like 20 different teams, too.
So it doesn't make sense now especially, but probably didn't make sense back in the day, too.
On to the next one, the Cubs. I could have chosen a lot of different trades because they traded away Chris Bryant, really got nothing. They traded away Anthony Rizzo and got nothing, but this one really stood out to me. They traded Dylan Cease and Eloy Jimenez for Jose Quintana, who posted like a 105 ERA plus with them.
Yeah, in 2017, he was traded to the Cubs, and in 2016, he did have an all-star year, but in the first half of 2017, before he got traded, he had a 4.49 with the White Sox, and then got traded to the Cubs. So the Cubs gave away Dylan Cease and Eloy Jimenez for a 4.49 ERA pitcher at the time, so it was pretty bad.
This next one hurts my heart because it involves Andrew McCutchen, and he's been my favorite player ever since growing up. Brian Reynolds was shipped to the Pirates for Andrew McCutchen, who didn't even play a full season with the Giants. So, yeah, it had to be on this list, but it does pain me to put him here.
In 2018, the Giants weren't even good. They finished 4th in the West, 73 and 89. Andrew McCutchen had a 7.72 OPS with the Giants, so not bad at all. But Brian Reynolds in return is bad.
Next up, the Guardians trading Lindor for Ahmed Rosario and Andres Jimenez. This one really isn't the worst trade. It's probably the least worst out of all of them because they received a good ball player in Andres Jimenez, had a good year in 2022 and fell off kind of offensively this year, but had a really good defense. So it's not that bad, but you're not really getting as much as you should for a guy like Lindor.
That's not a bad trade, though, because Lindor would have been a free agent in a few years, and they still got Andres Jimenez in return, who's not nearly as good as Lindor, but still has some offense and has great defense.
Next on our list is the Padres trading away Corey Kluber for Ryan Ludwig, who I've never even heard of. Corey Kluber would then go on to win 2 Cy Youngs with the Indians/Guardians.
The Padres didn't see development in Corey Kluber, so they shipped him off to the Indians, where the pitching coach helped him develop that two-seam fastball, which won him the Cy Youngs. Where that could be a common theme with like Dylan Cease, for example, with the Cubs. Maybe they didn't see the development, and he went to the White Sox and helped him develop another pitch for his pitch arsenal.
Earlier, I said that the Yordan Alvarez was one of the worst trades, and I said a couple other trades were really bad. This is definitely the worst one. The Rockies trading away Nolan Arenado and getting literally nothing in return. They got Austin Gomber, who's really the only MLB player in this entire trade who absolutely sucked when he did play.
The Rockies also signed Chris Bryant a few years later, so they really replaced Nolan Arenado with Chris Bryant, so it made zero sense why they traded Arenado in the first place. It was the face of the franchise, and why would you trade for Austin Gomber, a pitcher, when you're playing in Coors Field? Why wouldn't you get all offensive bats? It made zero sense.
This next trade actually caught me off guard a little bit because I didn't know this player played for the Astros. The Astros traded Josh Hader to the Brewers in return for Carlos Gomez and Mike Fiers, and now Josh Hader's signed with the Astros this offseason.
Yeah, Carlos Gomez was awful in the Astros, had a 670 OPS in his first year. In his second year, he had a 594, and he got traded the same year and posted up a 905 OPS for the Texas Rangers in the same year.
This next trade was also really surprising to me, just like the Astros one, because I didn't know this player played for this team. The Mariners traded Pablo Lopez to the Marlins, and in return, the Mariners received David Phelps.
Imagine the Mariners' rotation with Pablo Lopez. They probably would have never traded for Luis Castillo, though. But you still have like Logan Gilbert, George Kirby, Pablo Lopez, and Bryce Miller. You still have a ton of guys, too. A lot of depth. That's just not a good trade for the Mariners. They would have a potential to win the West with that pitching rotation.
We talked about Corey Kluber earlier. This time, he's on the other side of the trade. He was traded to the Rangers, and in return, the Indians got Emmanuel Clase. Kluber only played 1 season. It was a COVID season for the Rangers.
And he pitched 1 inning for the Rangers.
He pitched like 1 inning.
Wait, the Rangers had Emmanuel Clase?
Yep.
I did not know that. They need a closer, too. If you look at the Rangers team, they need a closer. So that could be one of the worst trades right there because Corey Kluber literally pitched 1 inning for them in 2020.
Up next, the Reds traded Aroldis Chapman to the Yankees in return for Caleb Cotham, who's now the pitching coach for the Phillies, and Rookie Davis, who I don't even know who that is. That's really bad.
That trade is actually just kind of funny. It's not like it's so bad that it's funny.
Yeah, it's laughable.
Yeah, I mean, Aroldis Chapman was an absolute stud. It's just that's just a historically bad trade.
Up next, the Braves. I couldn't really find a bad trade for them because, they're just a dynasty. They're run very well, and they don't make bad trades. They don't make bad signings. But the only worst one I could find is Alex Wood being traded to the Dodgers, and in return, they got Hector Oliveira. Never even heard of him. Alex Wood was maybe an all-star caliber pitcher at the time, but nothing too special. Not a ripoff or anything.
Yeah. The Braves are just so special that they don't make these bad decisions or bad trades or bad signs like you said. So there's really none that you could have really put that I know off the top of my head.
For how bad the Angels are, they actually haven't really made too many bad trades, so you got to give them props then. But the only one I really did find is they traded away Mike Clevenger to the Indians for Vinny Pestano, I think, as you say his name. So, I mean, it's pretty bad because
Clevenger's never been great.
Yeah, but Clevenger was a good 2-3 pitcher with the Indians.
A year or two.
Yeah,
so that's not even that bad. As bad as their organization is and how they can't win a championship or even make the playoffs with Ohtani and Trout or even Trout in his prime, as bad as that is, they actually haven't made that bad of a trade. What you're saying.
If that's the worst one, that's really not that bad.
Yeah, it's not bad at all.
But this next one's really bad. The Phillies really haven't made bad trades in recent memory, but when they traded Cliff Lee, they basically got no one. They got J.C. Ramirez. I've never even heard that guy, and I'm a Phillies fan. I've never even heard of him.
It was one of those cases where the team was rebuilding and they traded one of their best players and got nothing in return. I don't know why teams do this. It's such a common theme. They literally get nothing in return for their best player.
Coming up next, the Nationals. This was really between two trades. It was either Max Scherzer and Trey Turner for Keibert Ruiz and Josiah Gray, which I didn't pick that one because Josiah Gray is a good pitcher and Keibert Ruiz still has potential. The one I chose was Juan Soto and Josh Bell for CJ Abrams, who's a good ball player, but nothing like Juan Soto and Josh Bell special, and Mackenzie Gore, who's really not a good pitcher. The Twins are next up. They haven't made too many bad trades, but this next one is not that great. They traded Ynier Cano to the Orioles. In return, Jorge Lopez. Lopez sucked with the Twins, and Ynier Cano has established himself as one of the best setup pitchers in the game.
Yeah, and being a setup guy next to Johan Durant would have been amazing and really helped the Twins out a ton.
Same situation with the Royals here. They haven't made too many bad trades. Most of their guys are free agents there, so the only one I could find is they traded Andrew Benintendi to the Yankees for 3 minor league pitchers. It's nothing terrible, but it's the worst one I could find. Here's another trade that involves Josh Hader. He was traded to the Padres, and in return, the Brewers got Taylor Rogers, who's not even on the team anymore, Dinelson Lamet, who's been a bust, not on the team anymore, Esteury Ruiz, who was traded to the A's, and Robert Gasser, never even heard of him. And the last team, the Mets, trading away Curtis Granderson to the Dodgers in a player to be named later trade. I looked up the name, and I didn't even know who it was, so he doesn't even deserve to be recognized. But yeah, that's pretty bad by the Mets.